Welcome, everyone, to Monster Monday. I'm your host, DM Gallibond. Alright, everybody, if you have been on the stream, you've been listening to the dulcet tones of Kevin MacLeod from over at Incompetech.com. You can find all of his compositions over there. The ones that we play here on the pre-show are all from the Roll20 default um, default library in the jukebox. They come pre-packaged with Roll20, but you can also get those and thousands more over at his website. Tonight on Monster Monday, we're going to continue looking at our series of monsters that originated in Magic the Gathering and that I have converted over for D&D 5e, and continuing with specifically monsters out of the Guilds of Ravnica set that I'm using for a particular campaign. It's June 1st, 2020. And tonight we will be looking at the Barrier of Bones. But before we start, I just want to say special thanks out to Mo over at the Tabletop Bellhop. He has everything you could possibly want for all kinds of tabletop games, including card games, board games, RPGs, traditional party games, whatever. You name it. He's got everything about it, from links to buy it, industry reviews, product testing, and podcasts and streams that feature everything from analysis to live play. All right, so tonight on Monster Monday, we are going to take a look at the Barrier of Bones. As I mentioned before, the Barrier of Bones is a creature card from Guilds of Ravnica. It's categorized as a skeleton wall from the House Demir Guild. And when the PCs in my Walker of Waterdeep campaign went to Ravnica as part of their ongoing mission, this was a monster they met when several of them were ambushed by House Demir. Basically, I had the Barrier of Bones be what the House Demir ambush team used to block off both ends of the alley where the ambush was happening. And it was one of these ambushes that wasn't an immediately they go in attacking the party, or not even immediately a your money or your life kind of ambush. It was more of a, oh, we haven't seen you around. You guys seem interesting. We've heard some things about you. We want to know more about what you're doing here. Um, but clearly they were ready to throw down if the party was not going to be cooperative. Okay, so we always talk a little bit about the lore of monsters here on Monster Monday. And as a member of House Demir, the Barrier of Bones is used in their webs of secrecy and intrigue. Found a nice little quote out of the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which is a source book for D&D that is about the Ravnica setting in Magic the Gathering. To the Demir, knowledge is power. Guild hungers to learn everything it doesn't already know, especially the weaknesses of its adversaries, and to exploit those weaknesses for its own gain. Basically, if you think of the Zentarum from D&D 5e, the particular factions that are in Waterdeep, the House Demir are like the Zentarum, with all of the intrigue and evil turned up to 11. They're kind of like the Spinal Tap of that, if you will. They just really want to try to control information and thus operate in the background of Ravnican society and sort of pull the strings to make things happen to benefit themselves. Now, in looking at how to bring this character, or how to bring this creature to D&D, one of the things you have to decide is well, what kind of creature is it going to be? Now, of course, in both Magic the Gathering and D&D, every creature has a type. And you can see here in Magic the Gathering, the creature type is a skeleton wall. Well, there's no such thing as skeleton walls in D&D, so you have to find a creature archetype to put it into. And the thing that just makes the most sense to me is to make it a construct. So when you're going to put it into a stat block, you got to think in terms of the kinds of things that constructs have in common. And so when I brought it to D&D, I was saying, okay, constructs, they're made, not born. They can be programmed by their creators to follow a simple set of instructions, or others might have sentience and be capable of independent thought. And golems are iconic constructs. But if you think of, if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering and the way that walls are used in Magic the Gathering as defenders against your opponent attacking, well, those are kind of like living constructs in a way. So it just made sense to me to put those in there. And then, of course, if you're going to talk about construction, you have to put a picture of Legos. That's the that's the only thing that makes any sense when you're talking about construction. So, where would you find the Barrier of Bones in the wild? Well, of course, it's from Ravnica, and Ravnica is a big planet-wide city, uh, if you will. From pop culture, probably the closest thing that most people would be familiar with is the planet of Coruscant from the Star Wars universe, where the capital of the um, Imperial, or formerly the Republican Senate, the Imperial Senate, the Imperial Empire, that capital where you fly in and everything is just a big city. Several of the movies spend a lot of time there, so most people will be familiar with that. Uh, that's kind of like Ravnica. Now, Ravnica, the city doesn't cover the entire planet, but what the parts that aren't covered by city are just wasteland. So it's like you either have this metropolis or you have Mad Max Frontier, and that's kind of the way that it is. And most of the guilds, including House Demir, operate within the city. So urban terrain for this particular monster. Now, what about the flavor features of the monster? For Magic the Gathering, I always like just pulling the little flavor text off of the card. So from the Barrier of Bones card, the flavor text is the Dimir rarely make statements, but when they do, the message is clear. So yeah, if they're going to be building a whole barrier out of bones, presumably of their dead enemies, that sends a message that, yeah, these are people you probably don't want to mess around with, because they will not take it lightly, and they will punish with great prejudice anybody that crosses them. Okay, now here's kind of where the magic happens. When I pull a creature out of Magic the Gathering and put it into D&D, I like to first of all find something that matches the creature type and use that as a baseline, and then I do a little bit of figuring and finagling and whatnot. So um, it's a CR4 monster, and the way I have been figuring CR for these is I have been taking the casting cost, which is 1, and the toughness, which is 3, and adding those together, and that becomes my CR for the monster. So yeah, armor class 22, natural armor, so it's really tough to hit. Now, of course, because it's a wall, it doesn't have any attack, so it doesn't hit back. But it just, you beat on this thing, and it's really hard to do any damage to it. And then it's a big, huge bucket of hit points. 152 hit points. Probably because it doesn't have the ability to fight back. It's going to take you a lot to hit it in the first place. And then when you do hit it, you're going to have to spend a lot of time chipping away at it to try to get through it. So speed is 20 feet. Um, and now people may argue with some of my choices on that, but basically I just took the stat block from an existing monster in D&D and I plugged it in and I shifted around the stats to what kind of made the most sense to me, uh, which is high constitution and not so much worried about strength. Um, the dexterity helps with the armor class, basically, even though it's slow moving. Not terribly intelligent, not terribly wise, and of course a one for charisma because it's just. And the helmed horror was the stat block that I used. So saving throws +4 to strength, +8 to con. Now, yes, it's only got a 10 strength, but you know +4. Why? Because it's a monster from Magic the Gathering. That's why. Uh, Athletics +4, Perception +4, Senses, Blind Sight 60 feet, Passive Perception 10. Um, Languages, it understands Common and Abyssal, but it cannot speak. So the House Demir operatives can control the wall with verbal commands. And it's got a fair amount of damage immunities and condition immunities. And I also gave it some synergy with other House Demir cards in the encounter. And we will see that when we get to the abilities page. So normally when I talk about the monsters, I also spend some time talking about the attacks, but since this one doesn't have any attacks, we just go straight to the special abilities. Um, oh, well, of course, and I can't spell either. So it it has reaction that is called intercept attack. So, in response to an ally within 5 feet of it being hit by an attack roll, the Barrier of Bones gives that ally a +5 bonus to its AC against that attack, potentially causing it to miss. And that's also one reason why I gave it a high dex, is just sort of to kind of give it that ability to sort of interpose itself, almost like a fighter that has that protection specialization where they can throw their shield out to help block an attack. Um, Other than this, the only thing the Barrier of Bones can do is move when commanded by someone else from House Demir. Um, and the way I picture this movement happening is kind of like a gate. So one end might be anchored, and then it would just swing closed to block off the alley. Um, and House Demir would sort of camouflage the little pocket or whatever it is that the gate swings into when the alley is open, so that nobody would even realize it's there, or it would look like it's just a carving on the side of the wall of the building, and not a separate gate or anything. Okay, so Magic the Gathering, been I haven't been buying cards continuously, and I haven't bought any cards for Magic the Gathering in a long, long, long time. But I was part of the generation that was out there buying cards almost as soon as the game hit the shelves. Um, I distinctly remember my friends and I in the early 90s when we had a D&D group that we had kept going from high school through college. And then after college, we would get together, uh, every weekend, every other weekend, and we would play D&D. And then somebody heard about this Magic the Gathering game coming out, and our initial thought was, oh, cool. We can go buy some of these cards. It's probably pretty easy to play, probably pretty quick. You just buy some decks and you start playing against your friends. But little did we realize that in order to play a game of Magic the Gathering, which in and of itself doesn't take too long to play, you have to spend almost as much time as an entire D&D session just figuring out how to put your stupid deck together so that it will be competitive. And that just ultimately became way too much work. And so I messed around and played in a few of the um, constructed formats, like where you'd go out to no, not constructed. It's called draft formats, I guess, where you go out to a game shop and they just pass around packs of cards, and you just open and you make a deck from those. And that's basically how I played, because I just don't have the patience to sit there and put together a whole deck to play. So. Um, all that preamble is to say that when I decided I wanted to use some trivia about the games, I wasn't going to try to lecture anybody on strategy or the best way of using the game, because I'm not qualified to do that. Instead, I just thought I would look at some trivia about each of the monsters. So, Barrier of Bones was released in 2018, part of the Guilds of Ravnica set, and it was a common card. The artwork is by Vincent Proce, I guess. Proce, Proce. It was one of 143 creatures, one of 170 cards requiring black mana, one of 34 cards costing 1 mana to cast, and one of 35 cards in the set bearing the House Dimir guild mark. And throughout the entire run of Magic the Gathering, all the way from 1993, Barrier of Bones is also one of 183 cards across all expansions to have the word skeleton or wall as part of the subtype of the card. All right, so we do have. And then we do have somebody on the chat. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat, and I will answer those when we get done talking about how I wound up using this card. So when the campaign started, I asked the players. First of all, I tried to recruit players that had some passing familiarity or had played Magic the Gathering, so that they would be familiar with the concept of some of these other planes, because I knew ultimately we were going to these planes and that monsters out of the uh, game Magic the Gathering were going to be part of this. I also wanted some people, at least some players, who would be able to sort of translate for the other players, okay, this is what this place is all about. And one of the things I did to do that is I told them all a little bit about all of the guilds in Ravnica and said, okay, your character, when you guys get to Ravnica, you're going to have an opportunity to learn as a party about these guilds and to have your character possibly join one of these guilds. So they had a few levels to think about that as they were leveling up in Waterdeep. And one player thought his character would want to join House Dimir. So I said, okay, when we get to Ravnica, I'm going to need to have some House Dimir creatures. And I arranged a non-violent ambush when his character and another character went out to reconnoiter the city or the district where they were and try to find information that was not filtered by diplomats. The ambushers included 2 Barrier of Bones to block off either end of an alley, a Dark Blade Agent, a House Guild Mage, 2 Night Veil Sprites, 2 Thoughtbound Phantasms, and a trio of Dimir Spybugs. Now, I'm going to go through all of those in future weeks and talk about how I converted each of those monsters from Magic to Walker or to D&D. And with so many agile and flying allies, Barrier Bones could easily use that intercept attack ability to help its allies if the party members had decided to fight. Now, because one of the people, uh, that was in the group was thinking of being aligned with House Dimir, it was it didn't turn into an altercation. The encounter turned into be an opportunity for House Dimir to ask questions of the party members, for the party members to ask questions of House Dimir, and for the party through these two characters to sort of realize, oh, some of the things that they had been seeing around the city that they would catch a glimpse of out of the corner of their eye were actually probably some of these Dimir creatures that are just sort of around keeping an eye on everything in the city. And so it was a way of sort of um, revealing a little bit of the culture and the tactics and the lore of House Demir through this encounter, which I wanted it to feel like, okay, it's probably a bad idea to fight these guys, but I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't stacking it with a whole lot of really tough monsters so that if they decided they were going to, pull their weapons and start firing off spells and try to hack their way out, they might have had a chance to get out or at least, keep the fight going until some of the other party members could get there and help them. So that was basically how I wanted to do this. Okay, so thank you very much, viewer. No questions. All right, so I'll just go on ahead into the wrap up. I have been your host, DM Gallibond. And in addition to the Monster Monday here on Twitch, there's two other games that I run. Walker of Waterdeep, which is the game where I'm converting these creatures on Sunday afternoons. And actually, I need to update the slide because we have finished the Dragon of Icespire Peak. And last Thursday night, we began character creation for a game that I am calling the Sword Coast Chronicles, where basically we are taking a leisurely stroll through, kind of like your old survey of American Lit class that you may have had in high school or college. We're taking a leisurely stroll through the various campaigns that have been released for D&D 5e by Wizards of the Coast. And the reason we're doing that is because as I started looking at the Wizards of the Coast official timeline of when all these adventures are supposed to take place, they're all like literally right on top of each other. There's like 5 or 6 major upheaval events over the course of a year and a half or 2 years in the Sword Coast. And to my mind, it's like, wow, why are all these things happening at the same time? There must be something that's, you know, that's an initial cause or a primary cause that is behind all of these, and is sort of the catalyst or the instigator for all of these things to happen. So I wrote a little bit of a story and figured out how I could weave that story in and out and through some of the various campaigns that have been published, and said, all right, I'm going to go ahead and run a game where we're not just going to go straight through one of the campaigns, but we're going to weave in and out, and ultimately they're going to reveal a secret behind the secrets, if you will, or the reason behind all the chaos. That all happens on Twitch. Archives of everything that I do, as well as daily content where I talk about different aspects of D&D every day. You can find that over on my YouTube channel. If you really like the stuff that we do here on Twitch, would love if you follow or subscribe to the Twitch channel over on YouTube. You can subscribe, and if you ring the bell, it'll notify you every time a new piece of content drops. In the credits at the end of the show, you'll see how you can follow me on all the various social media platforms that I am on. And really appreciate you stopping by tonight to watch live or coming by during the week and watching the recap on YouTube. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and I will close as I always do by simply reminding you to watch out for the monsters under the bed. Good night, everyone.